There's no job for someone with such low education. What can a person without any real learning do? My boss laughed mockingly at me, a woman who grew up in a single-parent household. I had been putting in hard work all this time, driven by the memory of my mom who had raised me alone. He never acknowledged my efforts and even belittled my mom. When my mom passed away, my boss not only spoke cold words but also undermined me. I'm Sarah, a 28-year-old woman working in a small to medium-sized business, raised by a single parent. I joined the company right after high school as a part-timer and now work here full-time. Despite the company being relatively small, it employs a significant number of people. Initially starting as a part-timer, I fought hard as if my life depended on it. Thanks to my dedication, I earned recognition from my boss and became a full-time employee in my 3rd year. Even after becoming full-time, I continued to work diligently, not wanting to disappoint those who believed in me. By age 25, I was handling more responsibilities than my peers and gaining trust within the company. With decent pay and bonuses, I could take care of my mom and live comfortably. One day, my direct boss retired and a new boss, Christopher, was assigned. It was sad to part with the boss who had nurtured and recognized me. I felt a slight anxiety about getting along with the new boss, but my hard work spoke for itself. Above all, my retiring boss assured me he would speak highly of me to the new boss, easing my worries. On Christopher's first day, I was called into a conference room, expecting to discuss our working relationship. Instead, Christopher threw unexpected words at me. Are you Taylor, the high school graduate from a single-parent household who started part-time and worked your way up? It shocked me to be confronted with my background out of nowhere. Christopher's tone was intimidating, judgmental. My first impression of this new boss was not favorable, but knowing we would work together, I aimed to keep things professional. Yes, I am Taylor. I look forward to working with you, I replied with a smile, trying to deflect the comment. Uncertain about Christopher's character, I resolved to handle the situation calmly. However, Christopher continued with unkind remarks. A single-parent upbringing, huh? You probably can't handle this job. You didn't even go to college. What can an uneducated person like you do? I was taken aback by his harsh words. I was stunned. It was true that I came from a single-parent household and had only graduated from high school, but I had consistently performed well in my department. I may not have a higher education, but I've been delivering results in my job, I told Christopher. I have a high school diploma, but I believe my work speaks for itself. I acknowledge my limitations, but I am still achieving good results, I explained to Christopher. I noticed that, however, your previous boss seemed to favor you quite a bit, he said with a crude, lecherous look. Perhaps you used some seductive tactics to get ahead. Christopher's baseless accusations stunned me. That's not true. My previous boss mentored me to help me perform my job better. There was nothing inappropriate, I insisted, feeling insulted by Christopher's insinuations about someone who had supported and guided me. I couldn't comprehend why Christopher would attack me so harshly, but it seemed to be his nature. The prospect of working under such a boss troubled me deeply. Christopher smirked at me, making it clear he didn't hold me in high regard. Despite his disdain, I resolved to prove myself. From what I've heard, this boss believes in meritocracy, I thought. If I could demonstrate my value to him, there would be no grounds for further criticism. Feeling there was no other recourse, I decided to turn Christopher's bias into motivation and redouble my efforts. As I returned to the office from fieldwork, Christopher immediately accosted me with raised voice. Hey, where have you been? He barked. I was out on scheduled fieldwork today, I replied, perplexed by his aggression. Ignoring my explanation, Christopher marched over. You're incompetent at your job. Just do these menial tasks. Organize these documents, he commanded, thrusting a towering stack of papers into my hands. It wasn't my responsibility, and I was pressed for time, but I couldn't disobey. Reluctantly, I began sorting through the documents under Christopher's satisfied gaze. Perhaps sensing my compliance, he began heaping more administrative duties on me from that day forward. Whenever I attempted to focus on my core responsibilities, Christopher accused me of neglecting tasks or chastised me for minor errors. He even belittled me, saying, "You can't handle this because you're from a single-parent household." Until then, my job satisfaction stemmed from delivering results and earning recognition within the company. I had been managing to support Mom and myself without complaint, but now the stress was overwhelming every single day. Quitting my job would worry Mom, and I couldn't bear that thought. So, despite my desperation, I continued working diligently. Then one day, Mom approached me with a request. Despite my financial support, she didn't intend to depend on me forever. Considering my future marriage prospects, she wanted to contribute and save some money for herself. I couldn't refuse her, so I approached the company. Luckily, they were hiring an office worker at the time, which seemed like a perfect fit, unrelated to my department. Hoping to avoid dealing with my difficult boss, I arranged an interview for Mom, and she was successfully hired. Mom began her new role as an office worker at the same company where I worked. She found joy in the comfortable environment, enjoying her daily routine. However, a week after she started, Christopher called me aside. "Your mom got hired as an office worker," he sneered. "Is that short woman the one who raised you, the uneducated idiot?" Christopher always wore a disdainful expression, mocking not just me but now my mom too. I couldn't fathom how he knew about Mom's employment without my mention. The stress I felt more than doubled. Hearing Mom spoken ill of hurt more than any insult directed at myself. Above all, I worried endlessly about whether Christopher would confront Mom directly. I didn't want Mom to feel distressed, but contrary to my concerns, everything seemed to be going smoothly with her at work. Christopher occasionally made snide remarks, but Mom, a strong woman who raised me single-handedly, seemed unfazed. She brushed off Christopher's comments like a child's insults, laughing them off. Witnessing her resilience relieved me. She appeared unaffected by Christopher's attempts to unsettle her. Even after that incident, Mom continued to thrive in her new workplace environment, paying no mind to Christopher's remarks. Then, one day, everything changed abruptly when Mom collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Thankfully, her life was not in danger, but she needed hospitalization for some time. I decided to take time off from work to care for Mom during her recovery. When I informed Christopher of my situation, his reaction was outrageous. "You plan to take time off for something so trivial? You must not take your job seriously," he scoffed, denying my request for leave. "I'll use the paid leave that I haven't taken yet. I'm the only one available to care for Mom," I asserted, despite Christopher's objections. Permission for the leave had already been granted by someone higher up than Christopher, who understood the gravity of the situation and supported my decision to be with Mom during this critical time. I had rarely taken leave before, but no matter how I explained it, Christopher wouldn't listen. "It's not about that, just leave an old woman whose life is short anyway," he callously remarked. His thoughtless comment made my blood boil. How could he say something like that when I was telling him about Mom collapsing? I had endured his behavior until now, but I reached my breaking point. "I can't work under someone like you anymore," I blurted out, unable to hold back any longer. I knew it might inconvenience others, but since Christopher had arrived, I'd been relegated to menial tasks. With no motivation left, I quit on the spot despite Christopher's surprised attempt to dissuade me. "You don't have to go that far," he said, fearful of the consequences of my resignation. But my decision was final. With enough savings to sustain myself for a while, I ignored Christopher's protests and focused on caring for Mom. After things settled down with Mom's care, I considered re-entering the workforce. While I initially thought about returning to similar work, my confidence had grown. Inspired by lessons in business management from my retired former boss, I took a bold step. I started my own company. I wanted to wait until things stabilized before telling Mom about my new venture. About a year passed, and my company was starting to find its footing when Mom's health suddenly deteriorated, requiring hospitalization once again. Balancing the responsibilities of caring for Mom and running my business was challenging, but I managed without taking any time for myself. Another year passed, and the company was thriving, offering reassurance of its stability. Though Mom's health hadn't improved, I wanted to ease her worries and planned to discuss it with her soon. Then suddenly Mom passed away. It felt unreal. A truly unexpected event. As her only child, I had no other family to rely on, so I had to quickly prepare to say goodbye. Suppressing my tears, I made necessary arrangements. Despite not having worked long as a clerk, many people from the company where Mom was well-liked offered to attend her funeral. Perhaps it was Mom's warm personality that drew them, but their presence was a comfort. On the day of the funeral, more people came than I had anticipated, a testament to Mom's popularity. Amid the pain of losing her, I felt pride seeing how many lives Mom had touched. However, as the funeral was concluding, One attendee caught my attention. "Long time no see. So that old woman finally kicked the bucket, huh?" I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Christopher standing there, his words infuriating. Though he may have had some prior interaction with Mom, I hadn't invited him to the funeral and couldn't fathom why he had come. I would never have invited someone like him to Mom's funeral. My old boss smirked at my stunned expression, the same disdainful look he wore when belittling our single-parent household. Unpleasant memories flooded back, and I could only glare at Christopher. Approaching me, Christopher handed over a bunch of flowers. "Here, some flowers. She may not have been able to give her daughter a proper education, but at least I can do this much." His words cut deep, delivered at such an inappropriate moment. I wanted to yell in anger but restrained myself. I couldn't let Christopher spoil Mom's funeral or inconvenience the other mourners. With a heavy heart, I accepted the flowers in silence. To my disbelief, the flowers looked like they had been hastily picked off the street. Had Christopher come all this way just to mock me like this? As Christopher saw my expression, his grin widened maliciously. That moment, my suppressed emotions erupted. I couldn't remain silent after hearing such disrespect toward my beloved Mom. "If this is how you truly feel about me, then I understand. In that case, I'll have to cancel our business deal with your company." Christopher stared blankly, clearly perplexed. "Deal? What are you talking about?" My former boss looked clueless, so I calmly explained the implications of my words. "I have been asked by colleagues and seniors in the sales department to sign numerous contracts, but I want to terminate them all. I need to reconsider our relationship with a company that employs someone like you," I declared firmly. Initially, my former boss didn't take me seriously. However, the next day, he sent a formal notice to Christopher's company. Christopher's face went pale upon receiving it. He clearly hadn't expected that I had started a successful business. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Christopher came to apologize promptly. I'm sorry," he muttered, his apology lacking sincerity. My anger simmered. "Sorry? Do you think that's enough? You insulted my mom while she was alive, gave me only menial tasks, and what about the funeral?" I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Christopher appeared speechless while the president accompanying him apologized deeply. "I am so sorry for not intervening," he said, tears welling in his eyes. His genuine remorse touched me deeply, considering how much he had supported me in the past. Out of respect for the president and his sincere apology, I decided to reconsider continuing the business relationship. As we discussed next steps, Christopher visibly relaxed. "I'm relieved. Let's let bygones be bygones and move forward together," Christopher said with an awkward smile, extending his hand for a handshake. His assumption of reconciliation was premature. "You're fired, Christopher," the president announced abruptly, shocking us all. "What? Fired? Why?" I apologized, and we're continuing the deal, Christopher protested, disbelief written all over his face. The president remained resolute. "I've decided to terminate your employment knowing I will not continue this business relationship under these terms. I agreed to proceed only out of respect for the president. I want you to understand, I will never forgive you, no matter what you say," I asserted firmly. Christopher fell silent, visibly affected by my words. "It's the consequence of your own actions," the president interjected dismissively, leaving with a dejected Christopher in tow. The next day, it became apparent that my former boss had indeed been fired from the company. Shortly afterward, I received a resentful call from Christopher, lamenting the loss of his job and the challenges of finding new employment at his age. "You've ruined my life. Take responsibility for what's happened," he shouted angrily over the phone. In response, I made an unexpected proposal to the furious Christopher. "How about I hire you at my company? I can't offer much in terms of pay, but it seems you're out of options because of me." Upon hearing this, Christopher exploded with emotion and abruptly hung up. The idea of being employed by someone he had ridiculed must have been a deep humiliation for him. I didn't expect him to accept the offer. A month later, however, unable to secure another job, Christopher reached out to me and asked to be hired. It surprised me, but I decided to give him a chance. Now, in a role reversal, made Christopher experience the same menial tasks and lack of responsibility that I had endured. "Why do I have to do these menial tasks? Anyone could do this," he complained bitterly. Ignoring his protests, I kept him on simple tasks, reminding him, "If you can't handle these basic duties, you'll be dismissed for incompetence. The boss's orders are absolute." There's no room for defiance. Christopher appeared downtrodden, a stark contrast to his arrogant demeanor in his previous role. Eventually, unable to bear the humiliation, he quit the company. Reflecting on this experience, I realized the irony of Christopher facing what he had inflicted upon me. Treating others as he had treated me led to his downfall, a simple truth he failed to grasp. Meanwhile, my company continues to grow steadily and thrive. I've learned that persistent effort yields results, whereas without it, success remains modest at best. Whether one ends up like Christopher or not ultimately depends on understanding this fundamental lesson.